Brian, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Brian Atchue. I'm the head of marketing and operations for Wolf. Little bit about me. I have a background mostly in advertising and marketing, doing some strategy and business stuff. And then about a year and a half ago, stopped working at NIDATE to start working on Wolf. And since then, I've helped build out Wolf into the program it is today. And yeah, when Car and I talked about doing some stuff about like how to apply and succeed at Wolf, I really kind of thought I could just talk on some of the key points that I see across just like really early stage startups just in general, and a little bit about like the mistakes that are made, and also about like the kind of like the startup and iterative process that like goes into as you get started. So feel free to interrupt me. I know there's like an audience mic or whatever, so if there's ever places to stop there, I'm happy to. But yeah, overall, I think the big thing I wanted to share about like if you're going to apply to Wolf is the key point I would want to get across is like making sure as you start to try and like build a Bitcoin business to listen to people and to talk to prospective customers. I think a lot of the time in like the Bitcoin space, people are already orange pilled and they want to get Bitcoin to everyone, and they have like a really cool idea that they want to start building. And not to say that that couldn't work, that you start building something out and everyone starts using it right away, but I think the big thing to keep in mind is that if no one starts using your product, or if this product isn't getting feedback from customers using it, then it's really hard to keep building. And I think, there's a couple things that I think happen there too. It's like to build on Bitcoin, I think is a little bit more complicated than things in the altcoin space where you can just spin things up. So, technical people get really into the weeds before they've even like asked someone, would this improve your lives? Like, would this like help you with what you're doing? So I think that's like a really big thing, is like to talk to people and try and understand their needs, and seeing if, Bitcoin and whatever you're building could actually fix that. A market need is important, but for anything. There's a really great book called Inspired by Marty Kagan, I believe is his name. And he kind of has like, in product development, there's a few things that matter, and, a few questions to ask yourself as you go through that. It's, will customers buy it? Will customers be able to use it? Like, that's kind of like usability. Can we build it? I think it's important to like be talking to people about what you want to build before you spend weeks and months building it. So that kind of like, he calls that feasibility. And, can you make a business off of it? Like, does it cover cost? And that's really viability, right? Like, you can build this amazing product and it charges only half a percentage or 1% fees, and it's so much better than the legacy payment systems that are out there. But can your company actually make money from doing that? Because, in my brief time in the Bitcoin space, it's been like 3 years at this point. I've noticed that, especially with like some different hackathons and things like that, I've seen a lot of like, oh yeah, someone built that like 6 years ago, and then either they didn't get users or they didn't have funding or the product died, and then someone comes back and builds it a few years later. There's kind of like this repetitive cycle that I think like exists out there of like building things without knowing what's like the next step of that. So from like a development standpoint, like if you're just like a hacker building stuff like that seems like what people do. I think some of the most talented developers like build stuff and then build the next thing and have fun with it and build all this stuff. But like from the prospect of, you're like, all right, well, I want to go out and actually build a business. That's like a very different thing, especially like in like the VC world. Like, you need to get users or like some kind of revenue relatively quickly in order to succeed. Yes, when times are great and there's like VC money being thrown everywhere, like maybe you can raise rounds without like significant revenue or like significant users. But like even when you raise a round, like you might only be getting a year, 18 months of runway. And in order to get that next thing, like you need those users. So that's like I know I kind of hit on a few different points there, but like that's the biggest thing I think I would suggest, whether you're applying to Wolf or like whether you're just like getting into a startup experience and you're wanting to build a Bitcoin business, is that talk to people, see if you can find an angle to actually solve the problems they have and you can add value to their lives, and then go out and build it. Because there's you can build something really cool, but if no one uses it, then you're not going to last for long. um I think another thing I kind of see in Bitcoin too is I think, a lot of people are very passionate about Bitcoin and, what happens with the Fed and central banks and printing money and just like the way that fiat in many ways has shaped the world we live in today. That that like as you think about like building this Bitcoin like business, you kind of get caught up on like thinking that you're going to orange pill the world as part of that business, and that is great. I think everyone should be out there doing that every day, like teaching people about Bitcoin and how to use it. But like if you continue to put your own beliefs and your own idea, like it takes time to like really open someone's eyes, and it's really hard for that kind of be like the strategy of the business. Again, there's kind of two different lenses there. It's like the lens of like us as individuals, as a society, and wanting to help educate people about Bitcoin. But I think on the business side of it, you have to like kind of keep in mind that you only have so long to get those people to become customers, to become users. Um, and what else? I think another important thing that I'd point out about like how to succeed in how to apply and succeed in Wolf is like it's like a lot of work, like an insane amount of work to build a startup. When you read stories about some of like the biggest success cases of like PayPal and Airbnb, like you look at some of these companies, they worked like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for like months straight. In some cases, like lived together and worked constantly. There is so much to do in such a small amount of time that I think that if you want to really build a startup, you need to embrace that and like be ready for that. There's no 9 to 5. You also like need to be every single department. Like you are sales, you are marketing, you are legal. Like there's so much to do. And yes, eventually the goal is to add to that team and bring in these different skills and do those different things. But the more people you add early on means the less runway you have to build something. So it's important to embrace this journey of being like, listen, I'm going to do things that I don't want to do. That kind of comes with the talking to customers thing, like sending cold LinkedIn messages or like sending out 100 emails to get one response. Like that's part of the process. And if like you really need to almost like change your like mindset of just being like, I need to go out there and just do things that I'm not comfortable with. Like, not to be corny, but like all those quotes of like life begins at the end of your comfort zone. It like really like is part of that process. So I think that's another thing about succeeding with any kind of like startup or business if you want, and especially if you want to do in the Bitcoin space, because I think it's really, I personally just think Bitcoin's hard. Like part of the reason we love Bitcoin is because it doesn't have all these ridiculous like fees and different things that you know it's hard to figure out that edge where you're going to charge people money to use your product. So I think that you need to embrace the fact that like this is going to be an incredibly hard and long journey. But if you're ready for it, I mean, like I believe if you put in the work, eventually you will succeed. So those are just a couple of my high level stuff, but happy to answer like any questions people might have or dive into different areas where maybe I could share some insights that might help.
I got a question, Brian. Out of all the people that you've seen come through Wolf, how many of them did you see transform within the first, like, I don't know, few weeks, or did yeah, just kind of, if you can just explain that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
there's
there's
a few levels to that. So, um, how many did I see transform? I would say like it depends. Like there's two ways I look at it. I think everyone that goes through the program comes out of it like a different person. Like the fact of the matter is, it's like 8 weeks of intense focus where you are surrounded by other Bitcoiners that are all on the same journey as you. So there's a big part of it where you are just surrounded by like-minded people with the same goals in mind. So like you have an energy. You're kind of all competing in a sense. You're like all pushing forward, that everyone kind of transforms in that mindset. I think the question of like, do they transform from like Bitcoiner to entrepreneur? I would say maybe like half to three quarters can get there. Like I said, it's like there's a lot of like needing to get outside of your comfort zone and going to talk to people and do things that you don't want to do. Like if you've been, like maybe you're this incredible developer and you can sit there and code all day, but if you're not able to go out and do sales calls or do this like market research and go out and talk to people, like that transformation doesn't happen to everyone. And I think that that transformation is the hardest and maybe the most important part of it all. So it doesn't happen to everyone. And that's why I think like I even put it out there in the universe at this point that like going into it, you should know that that's something that you'll need to do.
Yeah, we got another question here. This is good stuff, by the way. Right, like some of the stuff that you mentioned, I was like, gosh, I see a lot of my own kind of insecurities and stuff like that. So it's really cool that you're bringing them to the light.
Hey, Brian, this is Jim with Cascader. Quick question, just what trends do you have your eye on and which ones do you think, are going to be most conducive to successful businesses in Bitcoin in the next few years?
Cool. That's a good question. The one that I thought was like incredibly interesting was that kind of blend of AI and how Lightning could fit into that and like computer to computer payments. I think like as we've seen some teams in the space explore this and just like keeping track of what's out there, that might be an example of what I talked about earlier, where like, yes, we have this solution of something we can build and like, that these payments could happen and then they could like, there could be these API calls and you're paying for them in Lightning and they happen instantly and try and like change the entire like API marketplace or like I am interested to see if we're doing the exact same thing I said in the beginning, where you're solving a problem that people don't have or don't know they have. So that's one that I find like the product itself makes so much sense to me that I think I'd love to see it succeed, and I think it's an awesome use case of Lightning. But I am curious about whether or not there's enough people out there. I you know, Ben Carmen just wrote like a really great post on Lightning. I assume like a lot of people watching probably read that on Stacker News and talking about Lightning and how hard it is self-custodial and that like the B2B use cases of Lightning kind of stand out the most. And not to put words in his mouth, but that's like one of the something that resonated with me, that like the B2B use case of Lightning has a clearer roadmap there. I like 100% agree with that. I seeing the challenge of self-custodial Lightning and like the amount of work and like having to figure out channel capacity for self-custodial wallets is like, you know, as someone that's not as technical as others, like I don't know how to solve that. And if I was going to look about what that future could hold, my Bitcoin is, stored in a wallet. I hold my own keys. When I think about the future there, like a custodial wallet is not the reason any of us got into Bitcoin. It's not the ethos of what the path forward should be. But is it the end of the world if like you treat your Lightning wallet almost as just like a small thing where you keep some of your cash, right? Like the goal of Bitcoin is not to have custodial solutions, but if you're just moving in, I'll say it in fiat terms, but you're just moving in like $200 into a custodial Lightning wallet and use that. Is that good or bad? I know it's not what anyone's out for, but like there's part of me that's like, that's not that terrible of a use case. Like there's no way to completely rug all my money. I'm using it. I know the risks I'm taking. So I could see a world where like actually some of those custodial Lightning wallets like do work and make more sense. Again, it's very different in like the Bitcoin business side of it versus like Bitcoin, like the mission we're all on. I think those can somewhat be two different worlds at times. And I think I'm not sure it's good or bad to acknowledge that, but I think that's true. I could see like the B2B use cases of Lightning going forward, I think could be like huge. Like the way money moves today is like so crazy. Like, and like there's all this like lending and these ledgers and like the whole point of why Bitcoin matters. I could see like some really interesting use cases where like sending fiat via Lightning rails like could really take off further. And for any like people say Lightning rails a lot. The way I just think about that is basically like you buy Bitcoin in one country, you send it via Lightning to an exchange in another country, and it gets offloaded there. And then whether it's converted to fiat or used in Lightning, I just like that use case works. The technology is there. Again, it's not the goal of Bitcoin to make traditional finance work better. But I think from like a business perspective, it's like we now can move money better than ever before. And I believe in like some of those B2B use cases like that. Again, it's like I can't say it enough. Like sometimes in like the how to build a business world doesn't line up perfectly with like Bitcoin's mission too. And whether that's good or bad, like I don't know the future. I can't predict things. Like, you know, I often think about that where like a lot of people get to Bitcoin through like learning about altcoins and being a speculative, you know, like a speculator and a degenerate in many ways. But then they find Bitcoin, and it also comes back to like and I'm kind of rambling here, but like it kind of goes into the same idea of like stable coins on Lightning or some other LL2, like whatever way you choose to use stable coins. It's like I see a world where people's first touch point of like using some of this technology is like sending a stable coin where they're not thinking about Bitcoin's volatility, but it's using the Lightning network. It's good for the Bitcoin network. It's good for the Lightning network. But again, it's also not really good for the mission of Bitcoin, or it might be, like, I don't know. So, you know, if someone were to send their first stable coin over Lightning, and then that makes them more comfortable in using Satoshis because they're like, oh, wow, look how incredible this is. And now I understand Bitcoin a little bit better. Like, would they then convert, or then are we just extending the life of fiat? I don't know the answer to that, but I do see that use case potentially being powerful for like adoption of the technology. But I am curious and wonder, is it bad for the adoption of Bitcoin in the long run? But we'll see.
Anybody else have any questions? Brian, can you tell us when and where to apply and
Yeah,
when
so
the cohort starts? Yeah.
Yeah, you can apply at wolfnyc.com. And there's an application process on there. It only takes like maybe 10, 15 minutes to get that application through. You know, you want to really, the key areas to kind of focus on is distribution. I didn't talk about a lot about this, but like distribution is like a huge part of building any kind of business. Like, how are you actually going to get adoption? There's a lot of people that focus so much on product that they don't focus on how people will actually get that product into their hands. And there's some really great stuff on YouTube about like startup distribution and, you know, the early days of, I forget what company was the first one to use it, but the idea of like on Facebook or something where you could be like, invite 10 other people or invite your friends to this, like that distribution model like worked really well for the adoption of the product. But as things went along, that like, you know, people send me notifications all the time to like follow this or use this product, and I just ignore them. So I think trying to come up with clever ways of how people use your product is really important to think about and share in an application. So distribution, how does the product make money? Like how you can see the future use case, like what you're going to charge and how you charge it and would people be able to pay with for it. And I think it's really important just to like have some kind of information about product validation too. You know, kind of that first thing I talked about, like, have you talked to people about what you're building? What is the key feature that they want it for? I think that's another important part as you put it on the application. But yeah, the applications are due by next Wednesday. If applications do come in a couple days after, they'll probably be reviewed. But the hard deadline is next Wednesday, January 17th.
Yeah, and also if any top builder teams, will be announcing them right after this. If you guys are interested, definitely reach out to Brian. He'll be inside the internal chat for PlebLab. So he's a DM away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if anyone ever needs any questions, I'm happy to share. I don't consider myself an expert in anything, but I have some opinions that I'd happy to share. Happy anyone, and especially any like literally also if you're not even applying to Wolf, if you're building free and open source software. I'm happy to give some contributions there too, to see if I can help anyone with marketing plans or as they use product positioning and things.
Thank you again, Brian. I appreciate you, and have a great weekend. And thank you for taking some time to talk to us about this.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to say, Car, you and the team at PlebLab have done an amazing job putting PlebLab together, and just PlebLab in general was very happy to be a sponsor of this and for PlebLab in play. And I'm looking forward to the full program.
Yeah, I would say just personally, I mean, I've told you this many times, you and Kelly and the whole team there at Wolf is just some amazing people, some amazing Bitcoiners, and we're more than gracious, and we love going for the stars. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you, Brian.
Awesome.